Alrighty, folks, let's do it. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. We have a couple speakers lined up today that are going to share their knowledge with us today. Without further ado, I do want to get us to the presentation room. I forgot to bring the file pod in here, so while I'm chatting away, feel free to download the PDF. Kennedy, if you want to go get your screen set up. We are joined by Alex and Kennedy today, and we are going to be talking about building authentic youth adult partnerships. While we're getting prepped up, I'm going to slide into the back and get out of the way. And without further ado, Alex and Kennedy, the show is yours today.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. My name is Alex Polk. I am the programs coordinator over at T-Noise. I, um, I assist with our practice team, deliver trainings, develop our trainings. I got started with T-Noise about 5 years ago, sharing my lived experience with homelessness. And so for this conference in particular, I'm super excited to share the insightful information we have and share a little bit of my lived experience with it. And I'm here with my wonderful coworker Kennedy.
Here at T-Noise. In my role, I work a lot with youth engagement and specifically building, youth adult partnerships. And I do this through spearheading our Youth Voices program, which encompasses our youth listening sessions, our focus groups for learning and listening from youth, and our youth storytelling program that really uplifts and amplifies youth stories of systems involved youth. And also coordinating our Peaks Camp, which is an experiential learning camp for foster youth. I'm really excited to talk with y'all today and talk about youth adult partnership. I'll hand it back to Alex.
Get into the meat of our. Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna turn my video off for bandwidth preservation. There we go. So before we get into the meat and bones of our presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about T-Noise. So the mission of T-Noise is to strengthen services and supports for Texas youth and families to help them overcome challenges and achieve healthy development. And then in the next slide, we'll kind of talk about how and why we do that. And I call this the 3 Ps of T-Noise, which is which is basically our comprehensive systems change approach. So we have practice, where we deliver trainings to frontline staff directly, and in support and with the young people that we work with. We have partnerships, which is the team Kennedy is on, which is how we work with young people, youth and young adults to affect systems change, as well as policy. So that is our direct advocacy at the Texas Capitol on behalf of the youth and families. And in our next slide. Here is more information about our partnership. So T-Noise centers youth and provider voice in everything that we do. And in this little graph, you can see our T-Noise youth engagement roadmap, where you can see how young people are involved in our organization, from something as simple as interviewing young people all the way up to earning themselves a staff position, exactly kind of how I came about. So it's super cool to see that engagement roadmap. Cool. Kennedy.
Ooh. So we're gonna go ahead and .com, input this code 91059658. And it'll probably tell you that nothing's happening yet because I haven't started the share yet, but I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and pull that up right now. So yes, thank you for the code in the chat, Alex. Yes, so the question is, what does authentically engaging with youth look like? Um, and this can be anything, something vague, something really specific you see in your work, but just like to you, what does it mean to like really truly authentically engage youth? Definitely. Meeting them where they are. That's it's super important. Actually having youth at the table to share their real experiences. Definitely, that's a very huge facet of youth adult partnerships. Um, yeah, and like Samantha said, you can also put your answers in the chat. We'll be able to share them there. Meeting them where they are in their world, listening and learning. Yeah, so it looks like I'll have a pretty good idea of what authentically engaging youth looks like. These are wonderful contributions. We'll give it a few more minutes for people to come on in, paying them for their time. Yes, that's something that's not often talked about, but yes, paying them for their time is really crucial. Angelina said, doing what you say you're going to do. Definitely. Thank you, Angelina, for the chat. Having their voices genuinely be heard, being open and honest, honoring their experiences. Yes, these are all super, super, super crucial. All right, give it one more minute. Anyone has any last thoughts? But these are all really great contributions, and I'm glad that we're starting from, having a little bit of understanding, at least, of what authentically engaging youth looks like. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation again. Give me 1 second. But yeah, awesome responses.
Cool, cool.
All right, Alex,
Yes,
are you
I
able to
am.
see
Thank you,
that?
Kennedy. All right, so let's now dive into this presentation and what it really looks like to authentically partner with youth. And by looking at that, we're kind of see what science says about authentically engaging and partnering with young people in systems, especially youth who've experienced homelessness. So in this upcoming slide, it's really going to show here. I'm going to wait for it to populate. There we go. So this slide emphasizes the need for trauma-informed care and understanding trauma when, authentically working with young people. So as we know, and as most of you may know, trauma impacts young people in a variety of ways, including their speech, their school readiness, and social emotional health. And it really does put an overemphasis on survival, and it can impact their cognitive abilities. So whenever we talk about engaging with youth and authentically working with youth, we're really just creating new neural pathways and building healthy relationships with young people, which can improve health outcomes and engagement when interacting with young people, and can even help reverse some negative impacts of the trauma they may have gone through. And then in our next slide, we're going to go into relationships and how we can actually authentically build relationships with young people. So in this next slide here, I feel like what providers really need to know and understand is that there are several pathways connections can be made when working with youth, and it's important to continuously put in the effort with a young person. So that could be actively and reflectively listening, being present with a young person, celebrating and acknowledging their personal wins, and through that they're all building trust in those interpersonal relationships. I'll kind of talk about a little bit of my experience and just a perspective that I feel needs to be shared upon, and that's the importance of active and reflective listening when working with LGBTQ youth and young adults. So in serving LGBTQ youth, these techniques are extremely important. By active listening, we can improve our own points of view from varying perspectives and experiences of this population, but we can also benefit them by showing that we're actually following and showing interest in their experience by clarifying your understanding of their experience. something I've seen super commonly is, and I have experience of homelessness here, and this is directly from many, many interactions, not only with providers, but with doctors, with other healthcare workers. And it is, excuse me, I lost my train of thought. Um, I tell a provider some sort of my experience, which, we know is a courageous step in and of itself, and because there can often be safety concerns or repercussions when sharing our story. When I'm a trans person, so when sharing my trans experience, instead of a person or provider actively listening or reflectively listening, they kind of just go on a tangent about their son's uncle's daughter who is trans, gay, or questioning, which can show that a provider is somehow trying to relate to a young person with their experience, but it's not actually improving that provider client relationship in any particular way, if that makes sense. That's something I see so commonly, and something I hear a lot about in the trans community. They're like, this provider just wants to tell me about their son's uncle's daughter, but I'm just trying to get services and build this relationship out. So important to acknowledge. Um, when we're talking about active listening, what we really mean is that, it's a term used to describe a general approach to listening that helps you gain more information, improve your understanding of other points of view, and work cooperatively with superiors, subordinates, and peers. This approach requires, not that just you learn and remember more of what the other party had said, but also that you communicate your interests and involvement to the party as well. So, active listening requires effective use of verbal and nonverbal communication, as well as mental and emotional discipline. And so for that reflective listening piece, it's or reflective responsive technique. It's borrowed from certain types of counseling techniques and is designed to elicit as full a sense of possible of the speaker's thought and especially feelings. So really just helping someone explore their own personal meanings. And this technique involves reflecting back to the speaker what you believe and what is said in order to clarify your understanding and encourage the speaker to continue elaborating on your point of view. So to kind of wrap up this piece, reflective listening is super helpful to provide young people with a opportunity to look inward and allow them to see a deeper meaning of what they're saying beyond a basic surface level conversation, which is, can be kind of a slippery slope. So I wanted to acknowledge this, that when working with LGBTQ youth, it's important to kind of take caution in asking, take caution in asking potentially invasive questions for clarity. You want to be very literal in the type of clarity that you seek, or whenever you're repeating back someone's experience, if they're sharing their lived experience, because there can be potential for re-traumatization when serving this population. So kind of a mental note that you need to take when engaging with all youth, but particularly with LGBTQ youth. And we'll lead into the next portion of our presentation. I think Kennedy is leading that.
Have a community, that they have someone there for them. So how do we're gonna really discuss how to build up a strong support system. Yeah. So at the core of trust is safety. This is really just a central component of building that relationship, of building that support system. And oftentimes providers will be like, they're in a shelter, they have a roof over their head, we have people working here, they're safe, or I'm working with them and I'm a safe person, I'm not going to hurt them, they're safe. But even though, there isn't a presence of clear danger, it doesn't really acknowledge the feelings and trauma the individual had that makes them feel unsafe. Um, when people experience, violence or, not having access to resources, they may behave in a way that really seems to, someone trying to help them, counterintuitive, like, um, and thinking in that really defensive mode. Um, if someone who was physically attacked at home, couldn't escape the violence, because the locks on the door became a barrier, um, they may think, I only feel safe if there are no locks on my doors. Even though to like someone who hasn't had that experience, that seems really counterintuitive. It's like, your house is not safe if you don't have locks on your doors. Um, but to this traumatized person, this feels like the right thing to do. So in this example, in bringing this into like working with youth, your initial approach, shouldn't be, that's wrong, locks are good, or something along those lines, but really, work to understand them. This is especially, important with homeless youth because they do experience a lot of complex trauma in their experiences. Um, uh, in not having access to resources, not having a lot of stability affects a person's, behavior and ways of thinking, and especially, their concept of safety. So how do we use that for building a support system? Spaces need to be very safe and welcoming, not only physically, but giving a person space to feel mentally and emotionally safe. This goes into both in person and virtual, events, or encounters with youth. If there's a way that you're listening to youth virtually, like, have you properly prepared them for sensitive conversation? Is there an option for them to step out? Things like this, make the environment safer for them, and they're more likely to build upon the relationship you two have. Um, like Alex was saying in the previous section, um, subpopulations, especially queer populations, um, have, um, very nuanced ways of experiencing, marginalization and trauma, and so that plays in that, and any other kind of marginalization plays in with how to support youth. You know, these youth have a myriad of different, experiences that are very traumatic or very sensitive to them, um, and taking the time to understand their subgroup or, marginalized group, can really help clarify to you, someone who may not be a part of that group or may be a part of that group but doesn't have that past experience they do, helps them really support them. And then lastly here, just really, providing guidance and training in the best that you can. This looks like, professional and leadership development. Oftentimes, systems involved youth don't have, a lot of access to these sorts of trainings and developments, and this puts them behind in the workforce, because of their, lived experience. And so, working to really develop them with, project management, working in teams, can really help give them that, um, equal playing field that they deserve, because it's not their fault, they were systems involved. So we're gonna practice now. We're gonna pop open our Menti. If you closed your Menti out, you can reopen it with the same. The code is 91059658 on menti.com. It should still show the previous question. I'm going to pull up the next question right now. And it still should be in the chat, 91059658. Ooh, I'm breaking up. Let me see if turning my video off will help. Give me 1 second.
Kennedy, I'm gonna kill your camera for a second and yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay,
Let's just plan on using. We'll use our cameras in the last room. So I'll just make the screen bigger for now, and then we'll turn our cameras on when we get to that last room. Okay.
is there anything you would like me to go back over? I'm sorry, I didn't know my mic wasn't working there, Betty. First part. Okay. I'm just gonna show the slide again. Basically, in the first part, um, thinking about safety at the core of trust. You can't establish trust without first feeling safe with a person. And it can be really difficult for people who have experienced complex traumas like systems involvement to feel safe. And sometimes they may do things that seem counterintuitive to safety, but to them it rationalizes in their brain due to their previous experience. Still cutting out. Still choppy. Let me see. Is there a way I can dial in, Greg?
Kennedy, let me stop sharing your screen. I'm gonna share my screen. That way you can just talk through it, and I can use my bandwidth over here.
Let's
All right.
see.
Are you
Is this
seeing?
any better? Yes, thank you all for your patience. Still choppy. Okay. Craig, is there a way I can dial in?
Yeah, actually, if you look at the go to your speaker icon, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're gonna see join audio. It should be, where's it at? Audio conference details, and it'll show you the phone number.
Okay, give me 1 second while I try to workshop this. Sorry, y'all.
How does that sound?
There you are.
All right. Can I get a
There we
confirmation
go.
in chat that people can hear me? Woo. Okay. Sorry about that, y'all. You know, tech these days, it happens. Okay. So you know what? I'm just gonna run it from the beginning because I feel like we missed a little bit. So be patient with me if you did hear these parts, but we're running from the top. So in talking about support systems, it's really crucial to think about safety as the core of trust. You cannot build trust without safety, and you cannot build relationships without trust. So it's a very root of building out these support systems. And I'm going to go ahead and go through the scenario again. So again, apologies if you did hear this, but so a lot of times providers will say, well, the youth is in a shelter and there's employees here, like they are safe, or, I'm not going to hurt youth. I'm a safe person, so the youth are safe. And to, an outside perspective, that is exactly how it appears. The youth is safe, but it doesn't really take into account the feelings of the person, especially, a person who's experienced serious trauma or violence in systems involvement. For example, think of a person who was physically attacked at home and couldn't escape their physical violence at home because there were locks on the doors. And to someone who didn't have this experience, locking the door at night would make the person feel safer, but for this person who experienced this violence, they only feel safe that there are no locks on any doors. And even though that seems counterintuitive and even more dangerous, it really makes the traumatized person feel better. And so when you're dealing with these very complex traumas or, past experience is in the systems, the, first approach should be not to convince them that they're wrong or like this is the right thing to do, but instead, provide them with a desire to understand. So this is especially true in serving homeless youth because they experience very complex traumas, especially around the concept of safety. So really just having that, like Alex was talking about earlier, that active and reflective listening, being open-minded and willing to hear a systems involved youth out. Go through the bullet points really fast. Spaces need to be safe and welcoming, both in person, virtually. They need to, provide that environment that makes the youth feel like their time is valued here, and that there are no repercussions if they are open here. Understanding subgroups. Alex kind of talked about how LGBTQ youth have really unique, nuanced ways of experiencing micro and macroaggressions, and this is the same with any marginalized population. So just really making sure that you do the work to understanding these marginalized groups, and it can help you really better support them. And then providing developmental training and guidance. This looks like professional development, project management, working in team environments. These are all opportunities that systems involved youth are often cut out of because of their systems involvement. And they really, when given the opportunity to learn and grow through programming, oftentimes really appreciate someone taking a chance on them. So all of these steps are really crucial in building those strong support systems. All right, next slide, please. All right, so practice time. I did say we'd go to Menti. Craig, I don't know if you can pull that. Oh, you can't because it's on Mentimeter. Nope, that's okay. I'll just go ahead and read out the answers everybody has. So no need to worry. So just go back to the presentation. And if you pull up this scenario, I think it's on the next slide. Okay, so here's our scenario. And again, it's menti.com, and then the code is 91059658. Okay. And so we'll take a little bit of time on this, so no worries if you're logging on. But scenario one is you start a meeting with several youth participants for your organization. Everybody's introducing themselves by stating their name, pronouns, and where they're from. After introductions, you see that a youth gets misgendered. You correct by another youth. You correct the youth who misgendered the participant, but unfortunately the youth continues to get misgendered again later in the meeting. How would you practice youth-adult partnership in this situation? So again, like Alex was saying, you could put your answers in the chat or go ahead and put it in the Menti, but take some time to just reflect on how you would practice, authentic youth-adult partnership in this situation. So we'll take a few minutes.
I wanted to jump in as well as while you guys are typing and just say there's really no wrong answers here. I think, later on we'll provide some clarity to help you out if you potentially need some more information. So if you don't know what you would do in this situation, please let us know that, because I'm definitely interested to know. We are speaking from experience in this situation. These situations directly come from how in the past we've engaged with youth and young adults, and is really a learning experience for us as well, and was a learning experience for us. Me as a trans person, I feel like when this situation came up, it was difficult for me to navigate, especially in the beginning. But as we learned and as we started, learning and growing with young people, and as I've, you know, I guess grew in my experience, this was something that we became pretty good at. And so I'm interested to know what people would do in this situation.
Yeah, Alex is completely right there. You definitely don't have to have a right answer. Also, there are many different ways to handle these situations depending on like the context of youth. But again, we're just kind of thinking, how would you practice like the skills we've been talking about today? So I have a few answers coming in on the Menti. First is pause the meeting to make that correction to the group so you make it known that proper pronoun usage is expected. Yeah, good course of action. Next person said, I would correct them again, maybe chat them to see if they prefer, see, 1 second, scrolled right up, but see if they prefer I correct them every time they are misgendered, see what they're comfortable with. Yeah, that really is super important, checking to see what the youth is comfortable with, what their comfort level is. Some youth would rather, be handled offline through chat. Some youth would rather, have it just handled right then and there. Someone said, I have no idea, and that's okay. Next person said, I don't have much experience with LGBTQ+, so I'm not sure what I would do and what would be best for the youth. Yeah, so that's, again, thinking about building those support systems, taking the time to learn and understand, because, this is something that is really pertinent to a lot of youth, and, taking that time to really just do some learning, but that's what we're here to talk about today. Next person says, we need to have a respectful and open conversation about how calling people how they want to be called is an important basis for respecting others' humanity. Yeah, I really like that answer, because it talks about the issue as an issue of humanity, not necessarily like LGBTQ issue. Because calling people the right name, that's just proper respect. That's not really anything about specifically to LGBTQ people. If I was calling Alex the wrong name this entire meeting, y'all would probably be like, why is she calling Alex the wrong name? That has nothing to do with anything about LGBTQ people, but just decent respect. Someone else said, I guess just gentle reminders that this is a safe place and therefore we will honor the pronouns we each prefer to use. Yeah, so that's definitely important, because making sure that everyone feels safe and comfortable should be really key in a lot of youth spaces. And someone else said, I would correct as kindly and privately as possible the person who was misgendering and contact the misgendering person to touch base about their mental, emotional space and see, the Menti cut off. See what I can do to help. Yeah, a lot of time, mine is saying preferred unless people use multiple pronouns. Samantha brought up a really good point. Preferred pronouns is kind of dated language on thinking about pronouns. People's pronouns are their pronouns, but like what Samantha was saying, some people, like Alex, for instance, uses he, they pronouns, and some people may prefer pronouns over the other. But again, doing that legwork, to be really conscious with the language you're using, especially around this issue, but really regarding any issues. There are lots of really sensitive topics that systems involved youth have to deal with that have a lot of really triggering and concerning language. So really taking the time to have that conversation with the youth is like, how would I best support you here, and what language makes you most comfortable, I think is really crucial. So I think that was our last one. I'll give 1 more minute to see if anyone else comes on in. But I think you all very much got the core of this scenario, which is that you want to do whatever you can do to make the youth feel comfortable. And even if you feel like you don't have those skills, sometimes just listening to a youth can make the difference. Sometimes just asking, how did that make you feel? What would you like me to do about it? Because, that is always just a tricky situation. And working to build respect around situations like these is really sometimes a difficult conversation to have, but it's really impactful and makes the youth feel very valued. Does anyone have any questions regarding this scenario, this section? I see Angelica asked, how do you keep it from becoming the focus of the conversation instead of why they're there for me? So that's a great question. I think some of the answers kind of touched on this. If you don't want to make it a big deal per se, you can, privately contact someone through Slack or like any sort of messaging you have and say, just a heads up, Kennedy's pronouns are she, her. So, just please try to refer to her as she, her. Or again, like messaging that other person who was misgendered, saying like, hey, Kennedy, I saw that, someone misgendered you. Like, how are you feeling? Like, would you like me to have a conversation with this person too? Because sometimes they may not even want to start that conversation because oftentimes, unfortunately, trans youth have to, just feel comfortable being misgendered in a lot of professional spaces. So a lot of times they'll be like, no, I don't want to deal with it. And as a, adult ally in their life, you definitely want to respect their boundaries, but also just let them know that they're there for you. So yeah. So, and again, every meeting and context of the people involved in the meeting are going to have different ways to approach this. So just using your best judgment, but again, really focusing on keeping the youth at the center of it. Any more questions? That was a great question, Angelica. Great. So if you have any more questions, feel free to stop us throughout. But we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'll leave you in this section with this quote. Engagement is not about what products and services we have to offer, what's in our backpack, or even the flyers that we have to hand out. It's really about connecting with the young person. So that's from the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council. And I really think this kind of ties together everything we've talked about, both the science, relationship building, and tying in those support systems. And I'll go ahead and go to the next slide and pass it off to Alex.
Yeah, beautifully said, Kennedy. I really like that scenario. I think it definitely brings up a lot of tough feelings. Definitely, being a trans person myself, like I have encountered the situation more than once, and I think it's definitely about safety of that young person who is misgendered, and safety of the group as a whole. And so, really partnering with young people in order to have healthy outcomes in the future is a super important process of that. So now we'll go into sharing power, which is something I'm really passionate about. So now that we've looked at the back end of youth adult partnership, we'll talk about what it means to empower young people. So we'll go to the next slide here. So it's especially important in the work that we do and should be a priority whenever we're talking about sharing power. It's a simple but extremely important thing to know that youth are the experts on their lives. At T-Noise, we use the phrase lived expertise rather than lived experiences. And that, just further emphasizes the fact that these youth are experts. So bringing them to the table and involving them in your work, if that's what they want, of course, is something that's going to push your work in a positive direction. And so you can do this by having real and honest conversations with young people. I'm talking like, sitting down with a young person and not just being like, hi, how are you? What do you think about this? But sitting down and being like, here's the information we have. So providing some sort of training and guidance that aims at dissecting services, potentially, procedures or policies, so that youth and young adults understand what is going on in the system they're involved in, but they can also adequately provide their input. And you'll be surprised, the input that young people can bring to the table can seriously change how an organization is run in a very positive direction. For instance, when I first started working at Teenoise and the pandemic hit, I was often putting my pronouns in my name whenever we were in Zoom interactions or mostly Zoom interactions. And I noticed that I was the only person who was putting my pronouns in. And it just felt really isolating. And it was difficult for me to, advocate for myself, or what I felt like, that was advocating for myself in that space. And I was like, hey, I asked my boss, I was like, can you put your pronouns in too, just so that we can create this sense of safety? And so now it's mandatory within our organization to put our pronouns in our names whenever we're in Zoom interactions. And so things like that are super helpful. And, I was given the information on what I could ask for. And I was able to make that positive change happen with that youth adult partnership. We understand also, telling youth what works best and the things that went wrong in certain situations. Just being transparent with young people is really what's going to foster those positive engagements. And something to remember and take home is that youth engagement and positive youth involvement equals higher self-efficiency or self-advocacy and boosts their self-esteem. We'll go to the next slide here. So, and most importantly, when we're talking about sharing power is understanding respect and the absolute need to create a non-judgmental environment for these youth in order for them to thrive. And this goes back to what Kennedy was saying about having that safe space and showing your support for young people. At Teenoise, and kind of a jargony language that other nonprofits use, is meeting a young person where they are, which really just means seeing them for who they are, following them along their journey, and providing them support. Sometimes that's direct. Maybe they need access to certain goods, items. For trans folks, it may need they may need braziers or access to understanding how they can get hormones depending on their age. And so support, care, and opportunity to better themselves as a person and even in your organization by hearing their input and sharing that power. We also pay the young people that we work with, which is something that you guys had said in the very beginning about how to authentically partner with youth. Paying them is a great way to show that, you are supporting them in more ways than one. You're not just using their information, using their story for your organization's own personal gain. It's super important that, you are financially supporting as well if you have that capability in your organization to show that you are supporting these young people in more ways than one. So in that, with that lens, we also need to make sure that we're respecting their boundaries. So for some clarity in my own experience, I was living in a shelter at age 18. I was super excited to get into this shelter in particular. It was a transitional living program. Previous shelters had turned me away very simply because I was trans right when I moved to Austin. And this shelter was super supportive. They were super kind. They let me choose where I wanted to sleep. If I wanted to sleep in my own space, if I felt comfortable sleeping in the same room with boys or in the same room as girls, or not even non-binary folk, which made me feel comfortable and respected. However, there would be group situations where I'd be in a group of people and they would highlight my trans identity, being like, hey, Alex, you're trans. What do you think about this trans bathroom bill? Which, for some people in that group, they may not have known I was trans, or it just highlights my identity in a way that is extremely isolating, while, you want to see it from the perspective of, they're asking for your input, they're asking for your own knowledge, your expertise, but they're also just very much isolating you and putting you in a very awkward situation because you're around all of these other young people who, in this situation, was re-traumatizing and a safety concern even. So we want to make sure that we're, cognizant of those types of interactions. What would have been better is an opportunity to engage that young person or me even would be to ask me privately, have a conversation with me privately after they ask my consent to talk about ways to improve their shelter and allow me to give my own feedback, which could be, if I was comfortable, translated publicly in a conversation, not about trans inclusion, but about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a whole. And this could have empowered me, not only me, but the other people in my shelter who didn't just see this young person being called out for their lived experience, but a conversation that was organically brought up, and you know that personally your input was valued and respected and brought to the center without being called out or being put on the spot. And of course, this may look different for any given young person, which is why we need to respect those youth's boundaries and ask a young person themselves for having those public conversations. Okay, we'll go on to our next slide. So this quote here, which is also from the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council, it says, "The young people we serve feel invisible, even within programs that are here to serve them," which is, more echoing the reason why highlighting youth perspectives is super crucial. We know, like I said, that they're the experts on their lives, and if we're not bringing them in these conversations, if we're not educating them on these conversations, then there is no conversation to be had, plain and simple.
Hello. Sorry, I wasn't sure how to unmute myself on the phone. So in our last section, we're really just going to talk about engaging youth, taking into account, all that we've discussed on sharing power, building the support systems, developing relationships. This is kind of like the accumulation of that. So once you know how to develop, the relationship and bond between you and your youth, how do you engage them in your work? Next slide, please. So yeah, so here at Keynoise, this is a really crucial tool we use for engaging youth. We have our own in-house youth programming, and we use this tool in every single project and step of that programming. So this is Hart's ladder of youth engagement. In thinking about a ladder, the visuals on the next slide, but at the very bottom of the ladder is manipulation. This is kind of like the worst tactic, using young people to support causes and pretending that, these causes are inspired by young people, but really not involving them in the process. Working our way up to decoration, where young people are being used to, bolster a cause in an indirect way, but not pretending that the cause is inspired by young people. So, using them in part of a campaign work, but not really necessarily saying oh, this is all youth driven. Look at this youth that supports it. Next, we have tokenism. This is unfortunately where a lot of youth non-young adult partnership informed youth engagement happens at. And this is really where young people appear to be given a voice, but have little to no choice about what they're doing in a project, how they're participating, or even sometimes what they're saying. Then we kind of start working into the more youth positive part of the rungs. We're kind of in the middle here. Young people are assigned but informed. Young people are given a specific role and informed why they're doing what they're doing, but is still then assigned, saying you're going to do this, but here's why. We next work up to consulted and informed. This looks like young people giving advice on, programs that are designed and ran by adults, but, giving youth opinion. And the youth are, told how their input is going to be used for the overall project. Next, we have adult-initiated shared decisions with young people. So even though the programs are started by adults, the decision-making is shared with young people and adults, so they work together to really make conscious decisions together. And then next we have young people initiated and directed. So this is where young people start the project. They assign the roles, they know what they're doing, and adults are really only involved in a supportive role when they need to be, because oftentimes youth don't have access to resources that adult allies do. So, and then lastly, we have young people initiated shared decisions with adults. So this is taking that step before it, but integrating adults into the decision-making process. So this is really working to empower young people, but enabling them to, learn from life experience and expertise of adults. And when you look at all of these steps, there are different, appropriate steps for different projects. Not every step is going to be an 8, and that's okay. Not every step can be young people initiated shared decisions with adults. Sometimes they can only be consulted and informed, but you're still working to work up the ladder. Young people are treated as equal partners in this thought of youth engagement, and it really helps them prepare for real life experiences of growth opportunities, and creating opportunity, especially for systems involved youth. Next slide, please. So here is a kind of visual of everything, working from manipulation to youth-initiated shared decisions with adult. And like I said, we're aiming for 8. Everyone would ideally like to operate in that 8 realm, but sometimes it's not possible, and it's okay as long as you're striving to go as high up on the ladder as possible. And it really just means, providing that adult support when necessary, and building on those, authentic, trusting relationships and support systems you've already established. And this really helps the young people gain the most benefit from either initiating and leading or participating in these sorts of projects. Does anyone have any questions about Hart's ladder of youth engagement? Okay, and if you do, you can shoot it in the chat. Next slide, please. So Hart's ladder of youth engagement is a really great program structural tool, but there are also smaller things you can do to build in that youth-adult partnership. Done doing roadblocks is something we do here at T-Noise. It really just looks like having a check-in document where they say, here's what I did this last week and I'm finished on. Here's what I'm doing this week, and this is what's stopping me from, finishing up my work, or this is something that I need to get answered before I can move on. This gives them the opportunity just to keep you in the loop and hold themselves accountable, but also let you know if anything is keeping them from finishing the work. Storytelling program, youth-friendly policies and procedures. So at T-Noise, we have a storytelling program open to youth in our programming and youth that aren't in our programming, that really looks to, depending on the topic at hand, have youth at the center of building the content. So really focusing on having youth write their scripts, write their stories, write their blogs, and then us helping the editing process, versus us giving them a script and saying, here you go. Also paying youth for their storytelling time, very crucial. And then our young adult leadership program is the YALC, and one of our ways that we do a youth adult partnership by empowering youth and elevating their stories and lived expertise. This is a professional development opportunity that we have for systems involved or previously systems involved youth. And we give them, trainings on how to, facilitate discussions, how to work on your resume, how to, ace an interview, all kinds of skills that they otherwise might miss out on, and implementing strategies like this and beyond, and thinking about all the skills we've talked about today can really help solidify that youth-adult partnership. And that is all I have. So next slide is just questions. Anyone have any questions? And if you could go to the next slide before we talk about questions, I will say that if you're interested in learning more about, building youth adult partnerships, we are doing a 39th annual conference this May in Houston, Texas, having a lot on, what providers can do, youth-specific tracks where you can hear from youth, and all these really cool folks. So if you're interested, you can click the link there, but you can also contact us, which is on the next slide, with any questions that you have today. But we do have 5 minutes for questions, so if anyone has anything you would like us to talk about now.
I'm going to stop sharing and take us to our final room so you can turn your cameras
Thank
back
you.
on if you want. So I did throw T-Noise's link into the web link, so we do have that resource available. I was trying to grab your conference one real
That's all
quick,
right.
but I wasn't fast enough.
Toss it in there.
Yeah, so for our conference, I did also want to jump in, y'all, and say that if you're interested in signing up, you can sign up before April 25th to get our early bird rate. It is nice and cheap for you guys. We also have time for questions here, but for our annual conference, we're also partnering with youth to build out workshops. So there's going to be youth-delivered workshops. There's going to be workshops specific on youth homelessness. I'm doing a workshop on the intersection of LGBTQ youth, commercial sexual exploitation of youth, and youth homelessness. So super diverse topic, and it's all going to be youth involved, and some workshops youth led. And we're also going to have a keynote panel with our YALC directly to learn from them and how we can affect systems change. So yes, looks like I got all the links in the chat. I don't know if we
And I've been to a couple T-Noise conference. They're really great. So if you get the chance, go.
Super fun. Yeah. So our virtual conference is going to be on May 11th, but we will have our in-person conference. I think it's May 23rd through 26th. If I'm not correct, you can check out that link as well. But I don't know if we have. What was that, right, Kennedy? 23rd to 26th. Yeah. Yep. So if we don't have any additional questions, I wanted to thank you all for your time and through the challenges we faced in the beginning with our technical issues. You guys are a great audience, and thank you for your collaboration on those mentees. It's really interesting and always a pleasure to see other people's perspectives and understand that y'all have got this, and y'all all seem super educated on this topic anyways. So it's a breeze to present on. So thank you.
Thank y'all so much. It's such a pleasure to have y'all, and feel free to reach out to us if you have questions or really about anything.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Thank y'all so much for definitely Alex, Kennedy. Thank y'all so much for your time today and your experience. We really appreciate it. I'm sure you're gonna have some questions come your way, especially as the Bounce State starts working with our youth advisory board and things like that. So we're probably gonna be tapping shoulders real soon.
Yeah.
But with no more questions, I'll cut everybody off today. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank y'all, and we'll see y'all soon.
Take care, y'all.